daawadayaasha qiimaha iyo qaayaha badan ee sida tooska noogala socda OGADENTV waxaan idin leenahay markale ku soo dhawaada barnaamijyadii aad nooga barateen inaan sida tooska aan idin ka soo gudbino halkan caawa barnaamijkii lagu xusayay xasuuqii loo geystay shacabka reer Ogaadeeniya mudane carab maxaad u malaynaysaa maanta waxa aad u timid
wariyarta waad mahadsantahay marka koobaad waxaan jeclaan lahaa inaan mahad ballaaran u celiyo rabbi subxaanahu wa tacaala maanta halkan isugu keenay marka labaad waxaan mahad ballaaran u celinayaa tiimka OGADENTV maaragtay adigu madaxda ka tahay iyo shaqada wanaagsan ay runtii wadaan haddaan fikirkayga gaaban ku cabiro hawshan maanta aynu isugu nimid waa madasha horta aynu joognaa waa University of Minnesota madashani waa maalin la xuso sanad kasta yani waxaan ognahay guud ahaan shacabka Soomaalida Ogaadeeniya gumaysi madow oo Itoobiya ayaa muddo dheer maaragtay dul fadhiyay dhibaatooyin badan baa shacabka loo geystay shacabka waa la gumaaday waqti marka bisha February oo hadda naga dhamaatay oo runtii ay noo saamixday inaan bisha dhexdeeda qabno hoolalka dartood ayaa waxay ahayd bishii ugu gumaadka badnayd maaragtay Ogaadeeniya marka waxa la isla gartay in la xuso sanad kasta bisha February caalamka in laga xuso oo maaragtay dhibaatadii maaragtay ku dhacday shacabkeena sida daraaddeed ayaynu maanta halkan ugu nimid aad baan ugu faraxsanahay shakhsiyan anigu iyo dhammaan xubnaha kale ka soo qayb galay waa shir caalami ah oo lagu qabanayo hoolka Human Rights ka Jaamacada University of Minnesota waxa ka soo qayb galay mas'uuliyiin fara badan oo isugu jirta Soomaali cadaan iyo maaragtay human rights activists aad baan runtii ugu faraxsanahay waxaan filayaa maanta insha Allah taala taariikhdeena iyo dhibaatada shacabkeena gaadhay inaan qarinin oo banaanka soo dhigno
aad baad u mahadsantahay kaasi wuxuu ahaa mudane carab hadda waxaan u soo gudbaynaa qaybta muxuu ahaa soo dhaweynta oo ay noo qaabilsan yihiin Faadumo iyo Nimco waxaan leeyahay ayagoo soo bandhigay buugaagtii iyo muxuu ahaa cajalado iyo boorsooyinka caalamka ku sawirnaa iyo alaab hidaha iyo dhaqanka ah Faadumo maanta ujeedada halkan aynu u joogno maxay tahay
السلام عليكم مقعي وحالي يراهد فاطمة عبد الله waxaan halkan iskugu imaanay suuqa Ogaadeeniya oo ka jira wadankayni wallahi loogu qabanayo Minnesota waxaan dhihi lahaa insha Allah kulli gobonimo soo sida ay u ogtihiin badeenan iska warhayno haduu Ilaahay meel kasta aan ku noolnahay oo way soo dhamaan
taasi waxa ahayd Faadumo haddana waxaan u gudbayaa Nimco oo ayadana garabkeeda fadhida Nimco maanta dareenka halkan aad u joogto adigoo wax faahfaahin naga siinaya sidoo dareenkaagu yahay
Assalaamu alaykum maanta waxaan u joognaa halkan suuqa dadka iyaga lagu hayo ayaan halkan u joognaa hadii Ilaahay yiraahdo Ilaahayna waxaan ka rajaynaynaa in dhibaatadaasna lagu hayo Ilaahay naga dhameeyo waxa meeshan aan ku haynana waa taariikhii Reer Ogaadeeniya oo dhan marka Ilaahay waxaan ka rajaynaynaa wadanka iyaga inuu Ilaahay noo xoreeyo
waxa ahayd Nimco oo noo faahfaahinaysay dareenkeeda ku saabsanaa maanta waxa aynu halkan aynu u joogno haddana waxaan doonayaa isagana inaan waraysi kale aan la yeesho mudane Asad oo kamid ah jaaliyada Reer Ogaadeeniya ee ku sugan reer Minnesota oo maantana ka soo qayb galay shirkan waxaan leeyahay Asad ku soo dhawow
عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته وريها بالآدي هذا محسن تاي يا بعد OGADENTV دمان تطبع سؤال سعودت وحى ما أنت هالك لو قبنا يا شر لو تبقى إن لو حصو حسوق بعنا كصعدة ودنك أوغادينيا يكوها ينقميسك إثيوبيا runtii xasuuqani maaha xasuuq cusub waa xasuuq in muddo soo socday adduunkana runtii ay iska dhigatirayaan marka maanta halkan waxaan sugu nimid inaan xasuuqaasi dadka dhibaatada loo geystay inaan maaragtay aan adduunka soo bandhigno khaasatan ardayda iyo dadka maaragtay professorada iyo dadka ku dhaqan gobolka Minnesota inay maaragtay ay arkaan dhibka halkaasi ka jira marka arintaasi ayaan halkan sugu nimid waxaan runtii maanta halkan sugu imaaday dadweyne fara badan oo maaragtay ka kala yimid Twin Cities area iyo tuulooyinka kale ee maaragtay u dhowba marka runtii waa maalin xusid mudan way maanta marka aad iyo aad u maasantihiin bahda OGADENTV khaasatan Mr. Habil marka aad iyo aad
Without further ado, we're going to get started with the Islamic opening with the verses of the Quran. I would like to call Brother Hassan to start off the event with us with the words of God.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدعو اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون. الحمد لله رب العالمين. The freedom and justice will come to the Ogaadeeniya people.
Thank you, Brother Hassan. Once again, this is an event put together by the Ogaden Youth and Student Union with the support of the community. And also, I like to mention this is it's co-sponsored by the Minnesotan University of Minnesota Human Rights Center. And without further ado, please, I would like to introduce somebody who is representing the University of Minnesota. He's an assistant director of the development and research at the University of Minnesota Human Rights Center. He manages and conducts research on rights issues. Patrick has been involved in the Human Rights Center since 2002, obtained his bachelor's in global studies with minor in history and French. He has his master's in public policy, and we are very honored to have you here today to speak on behalf of the Law School Human Rights Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Patrick Finnegan.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. As he said, my name is Patrick Finnegan. I'm Assistant Director at the Human Rights Center located here in the law school. Our mission is to do research, is to promote research, education, and training in the field of human rights, so that our vision is basically to make human rights advocates better at what they do by providing them with the resources and education they need to advance an informed human rights agenda. We have several different programs through which we do this. Perhaps our most recognizable is our online human rights library that has over 65,000 human rights documents freely available in 9 different languages. We also have 2 different fellowship programs, a human rights education program. We do applied research and policy, and we also house, as an affiliated program, International Women's Rights Action Watch. We have some history of working with members of the diaspora community like all of you here today. From East Africa, we've partnered with many of your different members from the Oromo community, from the Ogaadeeniya community, from the Somali community, to discuss and highlight issues, human rights issues of mutual concern. And many of the violent conflicts and human rights violations that go on in African regions, including the Ogaden, I also think of Eastern Congo, are very underreported conflicts. And so we're happy to provide a forum for the East African diaspora community to have a discussion about those human rights issues back in the country of origin or ancestry. And so in the past, we've hosted events in partnering with the Institute for Horn of Africa Studies and Affairs. Perhaps some of you have attended those events in the past. And so we're very happy to welcome you all here today to the law school at the University of Minnesota. So thank you for coming.
Those who came late, that this is a human rights advocacy program that the Ogaden Youth and Student Union have put together. with the support of the community and local education institutions, such as the University of Minnesota Law School. And just to kind of give a little bit of background of this, I would like to read just a short paragraph. The crime and genocide in the Ogaden had begun in full scale as the current regime led by the TPLF came to power in 1991. However, the Ogaden plight had started during the scramble for Africa in the late 19th centuries. Especially, it was begun when Abyssinians ruled by the Emperor Menelik II, who joined European powers to share and divide the Horn of Africa territories among themselves. European powers empowered, supported, and armed the modern weapon for Amhara warriors under the leadership of Menelik to conquer and occupy the Ogaden territory. Thus, the Ethiopia's successive regime from Menelik in 1890s to the current regime led by the TPLF had never missed any chance to raid, rape, and kill the Ogaden civilians, the Gambalian civilians. With that, I would like to just share one quote from the great human rights activist Nelson Mandela that says, "When a man is denied the right to live in the life he believes in, he has no choice but to become an outlaw." And without further ado, I would like to welcome to the stage somebody who has worked this with the youth side by side, and somebody who is really involved with the Ogaden Youth and Student Union. And he's the vice president of the Ogaden Youth and Student Union, graduated from the San Diego State University with a political science. And I would like him to please welcome to the stage Abdel Fattah Carrier.
Thank you, Abdel Nasser, for the introduction. First and foremost, I would like to thank the University of Minnesota Human Rights Department for their unconditional support that they have shown us for bringing this event together. I would also like to thank our friend and special guest, Mr. Graham Pebbles, who has traveled great distance to be here with us this evening. Graham Pebbles will be presenting shortly. In addition, I would like to extend my gratitude to the Ogaden Youth and Student Union and to the Ogaden American community who have worked endlessly to bring us together this evening. In order for us to remember the victims of one of Africa's longest running conflicts. The aim of today's event is to give a voice to the millions of people who have been silenced by years of government-sponsored terror, to remember those who we have lost to man-made famine, and to remember the countless men, women, and children who remain imprisoned without trial or due process throughout the Ogaden. Before I move forward with my presentation, I would like to give you a little background about the Ogaden Youth and Student Union. Established on June 9, 2010, the Ogaden Youth and Student Union is a nonprofit, non-governmental organization whose members represent over a dozen countries around the world. OYSU advocates for the Ogadeni people's fundamental and universal right to self-determination, democratic rule of law, and regional development and stability. Furthermore, our mission is to preserve the culture and identity of our people by providing a platform where our youth can develop ideas, learn, and most importantly, we wish to establish a breeding ground for future advocates of human rights. As many of you are already aware, the conflict in the Ogaden has largely gone unnoticed by the international community. The cause of the lack of awareness is largely due to the Ethiopian government's relentless war against journalists who attempt to expose the government's ongoing hidden atrocities. Access to the Ogaden has been so tightly controlled that for the past decade, only a handful of journalists have been given access to the region. That access hasn't come easily. Furthermore, only a few non-governmental organizations have been given limited access to the region. Their findings have often painted a grim picture of a region and people that have been forgotten by the international community. For example, in 2008, the Human Rights Watch published an extensive report titled Collective Punishment, War Crimes, and Crimes Against Humanity Committed in the Ogaden region of Ethiopia's. In this report, Human Rights Watch, an internationally recognized, reputable organization, detailed countless abuses committed by the Ethiopian armed forces. Though abuses committed by the Ethiopian government aren't new to the region, they reached unprecedented levels after 2007. On June 9, 2007, the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia announced that the government had commenced a large-scale counteroffensive to suppress the Ogaden National Liberation Front and its suspected supporters. According to Human Rights Watch, senior regional and security officials met in Xuskii, the capital. Those present included the Prime Minister's senior advisor on security and the Chief of Staff, General Samora, as well as the military commander from Harar, a neighboring district. At this meeting, the three men identified the most important sources of ONLF support. As one, as rural villagers and communities, two, as humanitarian aid agencies, and three, as local businessmen. In its investigation, Human Rights Watch found overwhelming evidence that indicate that government forces have indirectly or directly targeted each of these alleged sources of support. Abuses such as arbitrary detention, torture, and rape have skyrocketed since the new counterinsurgency initiative has gone into effect. During its investigation, Human Rights Watch has reported 87 villages, I repeat, 87 villages and nomadic settlements that were partially or totally burned and or forcefully relocated. International humanitarian law prohibits the forced transfer of the civilian population during a conflict unless specifically for the security of the civilian population. Human Rights Watch has detailed numerous accounts where military forces have ordered villagers to evacuate their villages within 2 to 7 days. When villagers refuse to evacuate, the army returns to carry out killings and other atrocities. You can imagine if someone comes to your house today and says to evacuate, what would you do? Would you leave your belongings, your family, your livelihood? People of these villages rely on the livestock, the land that they live on. Therefore, simply leaving is not an option. With the help of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, Human Rights Watch has been able to capture these satellite images that show entire villages that have been burnt as part of the government's scorched earth policy and counterinsurgency campaign. As you can see, these are satellite images that highlight areas that have been totally burnt by the government. The black areas indicate surroundings where communities used to exist. And in some instances, entire areas have been demolished. Again, there's limited access to the region, therefore, some of the documents this is all we have from Human Rights Watch. Since September 2007, the Ethiopian strategy shifted from the direct use of military forces to increased force recruitment of deployment of local militia forces, known today as the MINNEAPOLIS. Many consider the Leo militias to be more dangerous than their predecessor. With little oversight and an unending flow of weaponry, the Leo militias have intensified the Ethiopian government's scorched earth policies in the Ogaden. In addition to the abuses mentioned above, the recruitment of children has begun to sweep the nation. Under the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, it is considered a war crime to enlist children under the age of 15 into national armed forces. A mother in Gode, who was interviewed by the Human Rights Watch, stated, "My son was arrested and later was forced to join a branch of the Ethiopian troops commonly known as the MINNEAPOLIS. He was 17 years old. He did not finish his school, When I asked, why did you join the Leopolis? He replied, I want to save my life. No one will arrest me or you. Imagine if your 15-year-old child or your 17-year-old child was forced into armed conflict, a conflict that he wanted nothing to be a part of, a conflict that he joined simply to save and protect his family. Simply refusing to join the state-sponsored militias is not an option. The Leopolis practices are identical to militias established in Darfur, known as the Janjaweed. The only difference is that the international community has widely condemned the Janjaweed. The international community has yet to acknowledge the crimes against humanity committed by the Leopolis. Not only has the international community failed to protect against these vicious criminals, in some cases it is directly or indirectly supporting these militias. For example, Great Britain has budgeted 13 to 15 million pounds for the next 5 years for what they call peace-building initiatives. It is with certain that I can say that this aid will most certainly not go towards the people of the Ogaden. However, it will go towards funding and extending the Ethiopian government's ongoing scorched earth policy. You simply cannot reward a government who has for decades been accused of gross human rights violations with millions of dollars without some sort of accountability. The Ethiopian government's reaction to human rights abuses has often committed by its forces has often been to deny the allegations, disperse the sources, and actively restrict or control access to the region by journalists, human rights groups, and aid organizations, including by expelling the International Committee of the Red Cross in July 2007. If the Ethiopian government's claims of peace and prosperity, as they like to say, I'm sure all of you are aware of this new campaign that has heavily been promoted. They say peace and prosperity, or as we like to say, Nabat iyo Hormar. In the Ogaden held any truth. If there was any truth to the Nabat and Hormar in the Ogaden, it would allow journalists and human rights organizations access to the region. If there is peace and prosperity, why does the government continue to arrest, detain, and prosecute journalists and label them as terrorists? After all, if there is truly peace and prosperity, as they like to claim, if there's truly peace and prosperity, as they like to claim, what is there to hide? Unfortunately, the sad truth is that the situation in the Ogaden has yet to change. The unjust policies adopted by Menelik, Haile Selassie, Mengistu, and Meles continue to dominate the Ogaden. Because of the government's ongoing media blockade, there is limited documentation and coverage of the current situation by non-governmental organizations. Therefore, it is very unlikely, there's very limited resources that we have that we can show you this evening. But before I conclude my speech, I would like to share with you a collection of videos compiled by members of the Ogaden Youth and Student Union. These videos showcase over a decade of conflict, abuse, torture, and crimes against the people of the Ogaden. This has become the norm. And once again, I want to say thank you for your participation.
We have a few young poets with us today or tonight, and we're going to give them some chance to go ahead and share their word of wisdom with us. But before that, I would like to invite Xasuuqa Duale, who's the co-founder and executive director of Resolve Ogaden Coalition, a non-profit, non-governmental organization dedicated to ending the conflict in the Ogaden region through conflict resolution. Xasuuqa is also a co-founder of the Community Health Service in Minnesota-based organization. She's currently a candidate for Masters of Business Association, as well as Masters in Business Health. I would like to welcome to the stage Xasuuqa Duale.
هاي مركو هره waxaa rabaa inaan ku salaamo salaanta Islam wa salaamu alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The documentary we watched is the outcome of decades of compiled evidence demonstrating the government of Ethiopia's disregard and contempt for the death and brutal displacement of thousands of innocent civilians to occur is lost to the world, as members of the community and as human beings, we can't help but experience feelings of anger and sadness. While some parts of the footage may seem outdated, representing crimes that transpired what seems like eons ago, the violence in the region has remained the same for centuries. With no access to the outside world, outdated as they may be, these footages tell the stories of victims who suffered in the hands of successive Ethiopian regimes, from Menelik to Meles Zenawi. Marka, the video we just saw was just to help us remember the victims of massacre that happened since the TPLF came into power until today. The United Nations, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and other international non-governmental organizations all confirm that the government of Ethiopia is committing war crimes and crimes against humanity against the ethnic Somali population in the Ogaden region. Hundreds of thousands of persons are displaced from their homes by the excessive and indiscriminate use of force by the TPLF security forces and the Ethiopian army. Confident that the United Nations and the United States would not take military action, the TPLF in Ethiopia freely commits genocide against the ethnic Somalis in the Ogaden region. Although the open-ended violence in the Ogaden region has not been recognized as genocide, the atrocities committed by the government of Ethiopia and the Leo police constitutes genocide. Acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group is defined as genocide by the international community under international law. The Ogaden is composed of Muslim ethnic Somalis who have been signaled out due to their ethnic background and historical grievances. Successive Ethiopian regimes have adopted policies aimed at suppressing the rights of the people since the illegal transfer of the Ogaden to Ethiopia by colonial forces. Furthermore, their strategic use of rape has been recognized by international courts as an act of genocide and ethnic cleansing. In 1998, the Rwandan tribunal became the first international criminal court to find an individual guilty of genocide on the basis of rape and sexual violence. The tribunal acknowledged rape as a tool of war, a violent act perpetrated against a member of a group with the intent of destroying that group. As part of Ethiopia's ethnic cleansing campaign, the government has employed a policy of rape to defile, torture, humiliate, degrade, demoralize the victims as well as their families and communities. The government of Ethiopia used genocidal rape as the most effective and serious way of inflicting injury and harm against individual ethnic Somali women in the region, as a result, advancing in the destruction of the entire Somali Ogaden people as a whole. According to reports, battalions of rapists are formed from soldiers and individuals who have AIDS. AIDS contracted through rape is deliberately used as a way to murder Ogaden Somali people, and particularly Ogaden Somali women, resulting in the group's demise. Ethiopia is using AIDS as a biological warfare with the intention of preventing force and eradicating the existence of future generations. This, by definition, is rape. If what's happening in the Ogaden region is not genocide, I can't imagine what genocide is. The US and the international community failed to recognize Rwanda and Darfur as genocide until hundreds of thousands of people were murdered. How many more people need to die in the Ogaden for the international community to act and employ efforts to stop the genocide? Efforts to end genocide in Bosnia and Kosovo, European countries, were received with favorable reception by the world. This begs the question, are the lives of Europeans more valuable than those of Africans? Despite outcries and protests against the violence in the region by the Ogaden diaspora and numerous appeals to our elected officials, US government has yet to follow up with concrete action. The absence of response and the refusal to acknowledge the violence in the region as genocide is deliberate, and we can't help but conclude the following. The United States government is intentionally avoiding labeling the crisis in the Ogaden as genocide because using the term would commit the US government to actually do something. Under the International Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the United States and other participating countries are obligated to prevent and punish genocide. Nations under the International Convention have an obligation to make genocidal leaders accountable for their crimes. The International Criminal Court was created for this purpose of prosecuting genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes, and have proven to be successful in the past. By leaving perpetrators of genocide unpunished, genocide is made more possible, not less. It spreads the message to present and future leaders that genocide is unpunishable and acceptable, and that it can happen in anybody's watch. Furthermore, the U.S. has neglected democracy and human rights by focusing exclusively on an effort to fight terrorism. Totalitarian governments, African countries, Ethiopia in particular, has excessively played the anti-terrorism card to earn a relationship with the United States and has helped keep them in power. U.S. support of dictators with economic assistance and military funding must stop. Leahy Law, a U.S. human rights law, prohibits the U.S. Department of State and the Department of Defense from providing military assistance to units that violate human rights. The law states, if a unit is found to have been implicated in a serious abuse of human rights, assistance is denied until the host nation government takes effective steps to bring the responsible persons within the unit to justice. In the Ogaden, the government of Ethiopia, not just one or two of their units or individuals, is implicated in human rights abuses. Yet, in spite of this law, and I say this with disgust, Ethiopia receives nearly $500 million in U.S. aid each year, as well as military assistance. This assistance comes directly from our pockets as taxpayers. Our government is using our dollars to assist and fund genocide. And as we saw, the millions of aid given to Ethiopia is not being used to help our people. It's not being used to end the famine, or it's not being helped to develop the region. It is being used as a weapon against our own people. The aid there is not humanitarian aid, it's a political war tool that's used to subjugate our people. If the US and other nations stopped supporting Ethiopia with funds, then Ethiopia would not have the means to carry out these genocidal acts. Resolve Ogaden Coalition is not asking the US to resort to military means to try to solve the diplomatic problems in the region. Declaring the violence in the Ogaden region as genocide by both the United States Congress and the United Nations Security Council and imposing economic sanctions in Ethiopia is a step in the right direction in saving millions of lives. As we mourn the massacres of our brothers and sisters, we should vow to never forget the thousands of men, women, and children who perished in the Ogaden. The thousands who died protecting their loved ones, the thousands who sacrificed their lives to defend their inalienable, fundamental natural rights, rights that are granted by God to all human beings that can neither be taken nor given away by another human being. Lastly, we must constantly remember the thousands of men, women, and children who die for no other reason than because of their ethnic identity. It is these lost souls that inspire us to protest genocide, fight oppression, and promote human rights in the Ogaden. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive their bad deeds, accept their good ones, and have mercy on their returning souls. Ameen. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Hibab, for that wonderful speech. Add a quote on what Hibab said. It's a quote from Nelson Mandela, once again, where he says, "A good head and a good heart are always a formidable combination, but when you add to that a literal tongue or a pen, then you have something very special." And he also says, where you stand depends on where you sit. And tonight, where we sit is exactly where we stand. With that being said, I would like to call on a young poet, one of the young poets here that we had so far in the community, 17-year-old Safia Mohammed, attending at the St. Louis Park High School, will be performing a poem called Soulless. Please help me welcome Safia Mohammed.
This will go out to my lost family seeking for a revolution, lost days and nights looking for a solution. To my grandmother that reminds me of a time where we could walk freely on our land, ripped away her beautiful country, not leaving a single strand. And to my beautiful aunt, who wears the flag of Ogaden proudly on her back, reminded every day of the husband she now lacks. And to my weeping cousin who only sees corruption, watching time go by, waiting for her own destruction. And to my lost sister, whose child not even made it out of the womb, still hear the cries of the nights and where the guns go boom. And to my angered mother, who has seen her mother killed in front of her eyes, fearing the same fate, she closes her mind and listens to their lies. How strong are our people in Ogaden? Famous saying, what goes around comes around, but my people of Ogaden know of something higher. It's the haqq of Allah's promise, and His pleasure is what they desire. Oh Allah, the most compassionate, you are the guidance and you are the King of all kings. Oh Allah, give us victory for Ogaadeeniya. Oh Allah, give us happiness, we yearn for a beautiful home. Ya Mughithu aghithni, oh the one who saves, save me. Save us from this atrocious genocide. Ameen. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Subhana Rabbika Rabbi Izzatika Amma Yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We make dua to Allah because He is the one we please. And inshallah one day, Ogaadeeniya will be free. Ogaadeeniya.
Just like to read one more paragraph. The fact is that the TPLF regime policies and purpose is an explicit and the devious tactics of fabrication to quash or divide the resistance revolution. The practice of TPLF-led regime of Addis Ababa attitude towards Ogaden conflict had clearly transformed into a staged organized violence against civilians. Accordingly, what the regime has opted is to linger on its own resolute course of either way or the highway. With that being said, I would like to call on one more poet, also a very young poet. Her name is Hamdi Hassan, a 16-year-old from South Rapid High School. SAC, Rapids High School. She will be performing a poem called the I Have a Dream. Please help me welcome Hamdi Hassan.
The person who inspired me to write this poem is my mom and Martin Luther King Jr., for he one day feared his people, as one day we will free ours. Hello, my name is Hamdi Hassan. I have a dream that one day our family will find peace in their mind, that one day our country Ogaadeeniya, my country Ogaadeeniya, will gain its freedom, that one day that Ogaadeeniya, the green that stands for the green grass in Ogaadeeniya will green again, that the red that stands for blood in our flag will one day not be among us. The blue will stand by itself, for it stands for Somalia. The mother of Ogaadeeniya that once cried because her child is dead will one day smile instead. The dad will complete the family instead of being taken away from them. That my brothers and sisters will carry pencils instead of guns. That one day my mom will say, my family is free. And that I have a dream that Ogaadeeniya will once be free. Inshallah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamdi Hassan. I just want to mention we have few special guests among us tonight. We have, not going to mention names, but we have city council members, a city council elected member, and also somebody, one of the senator's office. We just say thank you very much for coming and participating and just kind of hearing our cries. We really appreciate it. And now our special guest that we have tonight, all the way from the United Kingdom, we have Graham Peoples. I apologize if I missaid your name. He's a writer and a director of a Create Trust, a UK-registered charity he found in 2005. He spent 2 years living in Addis Ababa, where he delivered a series of education workshops for acutely disadvantaged children and women in Ethiopia. He has written extensively about the conflict in the Ogaden region. Mr. Graham Peoples.
The majority of people in Ethiopia receive their information through television, and the television is owned by the government. Literacy levels in Ethiopia are around 48% amongst adults. So most people can't read the newspapers anyway. So it's the television which is the main arm of propaganda for the government. Political dissent is all but outlawed. It's not outlawed. Within the Constitution, political dissent is allowed, but essentially, in practice, political dissent is outlawed to the Ogaden region. The whole population lives under a sort of blanket of suppression. And within that blanket of suppression, you have particular groups who are suffering more than others. People in Gambela, the Amara, the Lower Omo Valley. These people are suffering huge persecution and violence, the same as is happening in the Ogaden. Perhaps not to the same degree, but it's exactly the same methodology. The people of the Omo region, and so on. The Aroma, and so on. The Genocide Watch. When I read this piece from Genocide Watch, I was absolutely staggered. Genocide Watch consider Ethiopia to have reached Genocide Watch have a grading system, 1 to 8. 8 being the highest, 1 the lowest. If you're at 8, then that's the most extreme form of genocide. They say that Ethiopia has already reached stage 7 of 8 genocidal massacres against many of its peoples, including the Anuak, Ogadeeniya, Oromo, and Omo tribes. It's an extraordinary thing to say. So, but as we know, some of the worst atrocities are taking place within the Ogaden region, and we'll now concentrate on that. It's a huge piece of land, a large area, maybe the size of a small country, a country the size of Sweden, with a very small population. And ethnic Somalis, maybe 70 to 90% of the population, depending on who you speak to. Speak to Ethiopians, they think it's much lower. Speak to an ethnic Somali, they think it's much higher. So, somewhere in between. Mostly the people are nomadic pastoralists, living in, without the military occupation, the Ogaden region is a place which is besieged by famine and drought. It's perhaps one of the most least developed parts of the world anyway, never mind the military occupation. So, we've got enough problems. Don't add to it. The struggle for self-determination, as you all know, has been going on for a long time, centuries probably. The British are complicit in causing perhaps the current problem when they arrogantly handed over the region to the Ethiopians in the 1950s. Since 1984, the struggle for self-determination has been taken up by the Ogaden National Liberation Front, the ONLF, and a group that is predictably regarded by the government as terrorists. There are terrorists in the Ogaden region. It is state terrorism which is taking place in the Ogaden region. The Ethiopian, the military and the Liu force are carrying out terrorist acts. The government, through the military and the Liu, hunts down ONLF members and with impunity tortures, imprisons and rapes its members and suspected supporters whilst carrying out widespread extrajudicial killings. It's an excuse that's used all the time, as I'm sure you all know, to arrest people. You are a supporter of the OLNF, therefore we will imprison you. There's no judicial process at all. It's just an excuse for arbitrarily detaining people. Other measures that it's a systematic methodology that the military is following, and very carefully planned and very carefully executed. And part of that is a scorched earth policy, which involves the burning of crops, the destruction of homes, and the killing of cattle. Human Rights Watch state that the confiscation of livestock, which is a main asset, we're talking about simple people living simple lives who their cattle is their main asset. The confiscation of livestock, restrictions on access to water, food, and other essential commodities have been used as weapons in an economic war. This is Human Rights Watch. Once you saw the images earlier of the villages destroyed. Those images were recorded by the American. What those images prove is that villages and towns have been burnt to the ground. They don't prove who did it. We know who did it, but the images don't in themselves prove it. To a town called Awari. Awa? Awari, okay. And they shared the base with the military. There were 600 Liu officers, and he had 220 men in his command. So I asked, what's the mission of the Liu force? And he said the first mission for all the military and the Liu is to make the people of the Ogaden region afraid of us. So he said the same thing as the Abdi chap who told me 3 or 4 days earlier. And I would ask, how do you decide on which villages to attack? And apparently they have a diary, a calendar, where they keep a record of the village, where they went, where they should go again. So it's systematic. He told me of I asked him to tell me about the first time the division attacked a group of civilians. He said he had a very good memory for dates. So I don't know whether these dates are accurate, but nevertheless. He said on the 27th of June 2010, we went to a village in Gurdumi looking for ONLF fighters. The ONLF fighters heard that we were there, and they mounted an attack on the Liu. There were about 80 ONLF fighters. After an hour or so, we pushed them back. 23 soldiers were killed and 5 members of the ONLF. In the morning, at 6, so this again, if you remember the previous woman who the military had stayed overnight outside the village, again and again and again, that's another pattern. So once they'd had this fight with the ONLF, the Liu force stayed there, just on the edge of the village. And at 6 o'clock in the morning, they surrounded the village. They called all the villagers for a meeting. The village buildings formed a circle, and from one side was where the attack by the ONLF had come. From that side, they took 4 girls and 9 boys. He said, we stripped 2 of the girls. and cut off their breasts. I don't know whether I can say this. We then stuffed their breasts inside their vaginas using the end of our rifle. The girls died like this. The other two girls were stripped and put in a hole we dug in front of the other villagers, and they were buried alive. The 5 young men, we tied a rope around their necks and hung them from a tree until they were dead. We did not shoot them because the ONLF may have been nearby and would have heard the shots. After this, some of the soldiers went into the houses and looted everything. They arrested 27 people, including 2 girls. I asked if they raped the girls that they had taken with them. While we were waiting for lorries to take us back to the base, we took 2 girls, aged around 19, into the bush and raped them. 25 men raped the girls. I asked if he was responsible for giving the orders to carry out these acts, and he said, yes, I ordered everything. On the way back to the base, it continues. On the way back to the base, he said they saw a small house and suspected that ONLF men may be there. Inside, they found a young girl with 2 ONLF support soldiers. A fight started in which 3 Liu officers were killed, as well as the ONLF fighters. We suspected the girl, who he said was between 14 and 15 years of age, to be married to one of the ONLF men. The Ethiopian military arrived and took the girl out into the bush and raped her. She died during the rape. I mean, this is a Liu commander telling these stories. There's no reason for him to make these things up. I'll recount one more story that he told me. I asked him what was the worst attack that he had taken part in. He said it was the day when the soldiers killed 76 people. It was in 12th of December, he told me, 2010. We were on patrol. We came to a large village where around 1,000 people lived. They went to the village for the usual reasons to try to find young recruits. While they were there, they called all the villagers together. There were about 600 people, and asked if any amongst them were supporters of the ONLF. Which seems like a stupid question because, of course, nobody would admit to it anyway. The crowd became restless and started to talk amongst themselves, a bit like this crowd. We failed to control them and could not make them quiet. We kept shouting, but they ignored us. So they took one of the elders out of the crowd and in front of everyone shot him dead. The crowd, who had been told to sit on the ground, stood up and started throwing stones at us and screaming. We shouted at them and started shooting into the crowd, killing 76 people. These are civilians. These are innocent civilians. 15 of them were children and 1 was a woman. When we started shooting, women ran away, girls were caught, tied down, stripped naked, and raped. Did you give the order for this? Yes. I asked him how many rapes he thought he had witnessed in the 5 years he'd been in the force. And he said he couldn't really say, but it would be anything from 1,000 to 1,500. There's no question that the so-called counterinsurgency campaign of the Ethiopian government and the military, there's no question that it's anything but state terrorism. It's very difficult, talking about the international community responding and the Americans and the British and so on. They're not interested. Ethiopia, as far as the international community is concerned, is a relatively stable country in what is a very unstable region. So they know very well what's going on. But, so to look to the international community to take action and to change what's taking place in the region and the country, I think is a mistake. I think the responsibility and for bringing about change in the country is that of the people of Ethiopia, including the Ogaden. I'd like to finish to try to bring a more positive tone, if that's possible. And it is based on the fact that I think we're living in extraordinary times, unprecedented times. We live in times where this expression, people power, has become everyday language. We have people's protest movements throughout the world. And it is these people's protest movements that are bringing about change. The two, perhaps the best known and the biggest examples of what's been taking place for the last 15 years would be the Arab Spring and the Occupy movement. The Arab Spring was a phenomenal event. And yes, I'm very aware that a lot of the countries are still going through terrible suffering. However, it doesn't change the fact that people rose up collectively, organized themselves, united, and in that unity brought the Ogaden region are divided. The opposition movement is not worth the name. There is no credible opposition. And the opposition that exists is divided and fractured. It is very, very easy to control a community, a society where the people are divided. It's what the British did throughout the world, and it's what the Ethiopian government are doing. The Ethiopian people must unite and protest, demonstrate, act. These gatherings are really important, but people need to be on the streets every month, every week, in every major city. The diaspora need to come together and organize themselves so that a worldwide movement for change begins by the people of Ethiopia. And I will be the first amongst you in the protest waving a flag and my fist.